Don't miss these amazing interviews coming up as part of the Experience Posted Anniversary. If you love the Experience, please post it on your social media and tag a friend you think would enjoy it too. Stick with us for live interviews and sales all weekend long on the Experience.
Oh, hey. So welcome back. We are on part 3 of our day 1 for our posted anniversary. I'm going to bring in our special guest co-host right now. Here we got Dan. Hi,
Dan. Hey, Jenna. How you doing?
Doing pretty good. So we have a minute or two before your guest's supposed to be here. I was just wondering how you were feeling, how you doing. It's been a while.
I was having a good day until I feel like I ruined Behemoth's big announcement.
You know nothing. Nothing happened. You saw nothing.
Yep, I know nothing.
That's exactly how it went down, right? We saw nothing. We know nothing.
It was just a wild guess. That was obviously completely wrong.
I know, because they were saying it. They're like, they're cousins. And I'm like, the only cousins I can think of is that. But I don't know if I want to say that.
Which now makes me wonder, are they doing a adaptation of the movie they did together?
Oh, my gosh. I don't know, because they've done 2, haven't they?
I only know of one that the 2 of them did together. That was their property, which is Code 8.
Yeah, I remember Code 8. It was
and I know that
Powers, yeah.
Yeah, and I know there was talk about them doing a sequel to it.
Oh, so that's what I'm thinking about then. Yeah. So let's see. It says Miss Jen said you won a prize.
Oh, very cool.
We've also got Val's back on. Hi, Val.
Hey, Val. How you doing?
Oh, she wants to know what is all the comic news. But that is the wrong time for that. You'll have to catch him on the Dan Wickline show or any of the other stuff that he does, like in stores this week on Tuesday nights, right after Miss Jen's show for Minute Skim It.
Yep. No, today I spent time doing a little research on our guest for the next hour.
Yeah.
Making sure I had some good questions for him. You know, it's not often you get to talk to basically one of the historical figures in comics. You know, someone.
I don't know. I feel like Miss Jen is one, and I get to talk to her every day.
Oh, fair enough.
But it's always nice for something different. Always to catch something else. I was trying to see if Miss Jen was available, but it looks like she's busy right now. She's blushing. How precious. What sort of stuff? Like, I know you've been with us. We've both been here for 6 months now.
Yes.
There's been a lot going on.
Yeah, I accidentally ended up over here.
I did too.
Nick got a hold of me one night. Nick Barucci got a hold of me and said, "Hey, you want to come on to the? We do a comic or show talking about the new books coming out each week, and it would be nice to have another person on it." I didn't realize what he was doing was setting me up to replace him.
Oh, okay. Miss Jen, so I took over for Instagram on her store because not a whole lot of people were on there. And I know social media because I have a ton of nieces and nephews, just obscenely too many nieces and nephews, ranging from 15 to 2. And so all of them are doing different social medias. And so the only way to keep up with all of them is through social media. So one night, Miss Jen was like, "Hey, Kyle, let Jenna do Instagram." And Kyle just went, "Jenna, can you do social media for me?" And I was like, "Okay, fine." And now here I am doing the shows and hosting with you guys. And it's great because I change my hair for every event. The last during our Pride event, it was actually blue and green. This time I've got orange and red.
Yeah, I did the blue hair for last summer. I didn't. It's been a while, but I had the full on blue beard, hair, the whole thing.
Oh my gosh, I can't do last summer. I don't have a beard. We did have our first guest of the day. He actually had green with a little bit of glitter in there, and that was really cool. So it looks like Danny is here, so I'm gonna let him jump on. I'll let you guys get to it.
All right, and I will give him a proper introduction.
Oh, have at thee.
All right. So he was an editor and writer for Marvel Comics in 3 different decades. He had a long run as the editor on Spider-Man line, went on to write the entire run of Darkhawk, all 50 issues, scripts for Marvel mainstays like Avengers, Daredevil, and Iron Man, and wrote the limited series The Deadly Foes of Spider-Man and The Lethal Foes of Spider-Man.
Yes.
He's also an author, did books like Superman on the Couch, What Superheroes Really Tell Us About Ourselves and Our Society, Disguised as Clark Kent, Jews, Comics, and the Creation of Superheroes, and most recently in the book I just finished today, A Marvelous Life, The Awesome Story of Stan Lee. Please welcome Danny Fingeroth.
Thank you. It's actually a marvelous, like the amazing story of Stan Lee.
You are correct. I missed her.
But it is awesome, and it's awesome to be here. So thank you for inviting me. And I know that Kyle was supposed to be here, and I think he's eavesdropping. But I hope Kyle, get well soon.
Yeah. Kyle's hanging out in the hospital, but he should be back with us soon. I know he's done a couple shows today, but he's taking it easy. So
okay.
So you get me instead.
It's okay with me. Nice to meet you. I've seen your name a million places, and now there's a face to go with the name. So
well, it's nice to meet you too. I've seen your name for years, having read Web of Spider-Man when you were working on it, and I was a huge fan of Darkhawk when it came out.
Cool.
And I literally just picked up the new #1 that just came out this week, which you're not involved with, but you did just recently do a story in the 30th anniversary special.
Right. Me and Mike Manley, regrouped to do the lead story in that.
Yeah, but I kind of want to start with the Stan Lee biography.
Okay.
Because that was, like I said, I got it when I saw you post about it.
A copy of it here.
Yeah, that's it. Now I got the audiobook, which you narrate.
It's true.
And you do a wonderful job narrating it.
Thank you.
Because I've had some bad narrators on audiobooks.
It did disabuse me of the notion. I'm a native New Yorker, but I always thought that I sort of had a more kind of, I don't know about middle American, but kind of a sophisticated, educated, some kind of phony baloney, non-regional accent. But people keep telling me, you did a great job with that, especially with that real New York accent you have. And I went, well, all right, if the shoe fits.
Yeah, we never hear our own accents. We just speak normal. It's everybody else is wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like the fact I'm 6'6". Everybody goes, man, you're tall. I'm like, no, this is average height for me. This is where eye line is. I don't know about the rest of you.
That's it. All that Renaissance perspective is wrong. That's it.
That's right. Exactly. Now, I want to first ask, because this was not an easy, this couldn't have been an easy task to put this book together. Because, it's obvious you did a ton of research. How did this project even come to be? And what was your process for doing all of this research and putting it together?
Yeah, well, it sort of combined my passions, which obviously are comics and people who make comics, and practicality. It's like I've written these books, obviously the million comics. I've written Superman on the Couch, Disguised as Clark Kent, The Rough Guide to Graphic Novels. And they're all highly regarded. People come up to me at conventions when we used to have conventions all the time and tell me that, I used your book for my master's thesis and my doctoral thesis. And it's very flattering. But I thought, it might be nice to make some money on a book, and what could combine my interest in comics, my interest in popular culture, my interest in quirky American Jews, and something that I could stand to spend years working on. Stan Lee, because now today is actually Jack Kirby's birthday.
Right.
And certainly the internet and my feed, and I'm sure your feed, is filled with hundreds and hundreds of Kirby images and praise of Jack, all well deserved. But even with the Marvel movies and TV shows, as big as they are, there's no name, for better or worse, that's as well known as Stan Lee's. in not just at Marvel and not just superheroes. I mean, I don't know, Todd McFarlane, Art Spiegelman. Those are like maybe guys who are close. Robert Crumb, but really far and away, Stan. So I decided, okay, it's a commercial project. I know Stan. He was still alive. This must go back 10 years. And I would sort of have this playful back and forth with him where I'd say, so let's do that authorized biography. No, I don't want to do it. If I want anybody to do it, Danny, it'll be you. But I don't want anybody to do it. Now, maybe I was the 10th guy he said that to that day. So we went back and forth. And at one point, he said, I can see you're going to do this. I don't want to be involved with it. Do it unauthorized and do whatever you want. He didn't say it that way, but that's basically not that you need anybody's permission to do an authorized biography, hence the unauthorized part.
Right.
But I decided to then pursue it actively. And he said, I don't want to be interviewed for it. I've done too many interviews. And I think it was around the time he was doing that documentary with Great Power. And anyway, my agent was able to get a deal that I was happy with. Took a while. Stan is an interesting character because he is well known, but a lot of people don't always know, well, will this be, is this something we can give a good advance to, or is it just blah, blah, blah? So all that stuff. And then so, I mean, look, in a certain way, I've been researching this since I was 8 years old, when I started, when the first Marvel comics came out and I started reading them. I started working in comics. My first job was for Stan's brother, Larry Lieber, at Marvel years ago in the 70s. So I've sort of had a ringside seat. But of course, but you're right, I also did a ton of research. I went to Stan's archives at the University of Wyoming. Also, there's some archives of other people's at the Billy Ireland Museum in Columbus, which is a wonderful resource if you ever are near Columbus. So go, because it's a great museum and a great. So and because of being in comics my whole working life, I knew I had access to Marv Wolfman and Mark Evanier and John Semper and Neil Adams. A lot of people would talk to me, and I think my training is not as a journalist, but I spent 20 years. I did a magazine for Tomorrows called Right Now Magazine, where I did endless interviews with people. I spent several years barnstorming with Wizard, just putting together panels and interviews. So I think like what you're sitting there doing now, I think I got pretty decent at interviewing people and digging a little deeper than somebody who maybe wasn't from the business, could go. So ultimately, after saying he wouldn't do any interviews, I did two like 90-minute interviews with Stan, where I think I'd finally learned how to interview him. I mean, yeah. I didn't think there was any point in going, what about Jack Kirby? I didn't think I'd get in, but I sort of found ways, I think, to sort of come in sideways and make, I sort of pride myself on interview people on getting them to think, especially older people who've told the same story 1,000 times. I feel like I'm pretty good at getting them to like just look at it from 5-degree different angle, where suddenly they're having insights about it that maybe they didn't have before. That was one of the great compliments of my life. And it's not just because I'm the chair of Will Eisner Week, which is an annual celebration of Will Eisner and his legacy every March. But the one time that I did a full-length interview with Will Eisner, he complimented me on my questions. He said, "Oh, those are really good questions." And again, does he say it to every interviewer? I don't know. I haven't researched that heavily. I don't want to know the answer if he did. Yeah. Anyway, so I did a couple of interviews with Stan about a year before he died. And he was, Stan had a lot of signs of aging and being old, and we know many of the controversies surrounding what went on.
Yeah,
but he could focus too. I'd see him. I was his regular moderator at the Wizard show, so either I'd see it firsthand or other people's interviews. I've seen this with a lot of older artists and celebrities and performers, where before they go on, they look like they're going to fall over. You think this person cannot possibly live through the end of the day, but they get on stage and suddenly they're focused.
Yeah.
And Stan was like that. So for these interviews, it was an interesting process, because even whatever had been going on with him before or after, during it, he had this sort of laser focus that I don't know how you explain that neurologically or psychologically, but anyway, so that was a long process, and like most like any big task, you have to break it down into parts. I'm just going to focus on this today, and I'm just going to look at this file, even though there's 100 boxes in the archives or 200 boxes. I'm just going to focus on this one box, which still has like 100 pieces of documents in it. So it's I call it writing the maybe if I'd gone to graduate school, I would have thought of it, I'd think of it more as of a master's or doctoral thesis, but I refer to it as the longest term paper anybody ever wrote.
All right. Now you mentioned it being Jack Kirby's birthday. He would have been 104 today.
Yep.
Along with him playing a crucial role in the creation of Marvel, his creative partnership with Stan is the subject of probably both their greatest triumphs and a ton of animosity.
Yeah.
What was your experience with Jack? Because he comes up a lot in the book, but I'm wondering, you worked at Marvel in the 70s and the 80s when Jack came back, stuff like that. What was your association with him, or what was Jack like for you?
Look, I only met Jack once. Technically twice, but I only really spoke to him once. And my part of the conversation was pretty much to which Jack replied, "I can tell you're a real firecracker." So, look, so I make no claim to knowing Jack Kirby. Literally, that, I never had lunch, or, I never spent any, altogether probably 7 minutes of my life I spent in Jack Kirby's presence. So, my impression, I've read all the interviews, and I've read with him, and it certainly is the most documented. I think they had a very complicated relationship. I don't, I think, which seems obvious, but you could say that there were obvious times when Jack had a resentment and a rage and anger at Stan. But there were times, you read some of these transcripts, or you see some, there's one particular interview they did in 1967 with a guy named Mike Hodel at the Pacifica station in New York City, WBAI.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in 67. They were still being polite to each other. I don't know. I think they were never best friends. They were never friends at all. There's a point of view that says Jack didn't trust Stan from 1941 on, when it's possible that Stan, ratted them out to Martin Goodman for moonlighting at DC, although who knows. I think they had a complicated relationship. I think, I don't think it was pure hate. On Stan's part, it certainly was. I think Stan was in some ways still always a little kid. He was the assistant that he was the teenage assistant that came to work for Simon and Kirby. Kirby was all of 5 years older than him, but that was a crucial 5 years. So I think it's kind of the easy thing to say is, because Stan was the boss and, related to the publisher and blah, 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 that he, Jack gritted his teeth and did what Stan wanted. I think you don't have to like somebody to make great work with them, and I think that's plain. But I think this is, and I base a lot of this on Roy Thomas's sort of eyewitness to this. Roy was there from not the beginning, but from 65 on, and so he was. I think there was this love-hate, and I don't know if Jack would ever admit the love, because that would have been, maybe he couldn't even see it. There was something where they needed each other in some way that seems to me, it's not just simply, I don't think Jack was a masochist. I don't think Jack would have stuck around, to be abused by Stan, or come back after those 4 or 5 years at DC. So no, they weren't best friends, obviously, but I do think it was more complicated than people make it out to be.
Yeah, I had. Oh, Sean said we have a question. Danny, having been in and around comics for so long, what has been the most rewarding part of your career?
Jeez, the most rewarding. Wow. I have no idea. I mean, I would say, to put it on a kind of, that's a multifaceted question. I say the thing that, as a writer and an editor, that I always found most kind of transcendent was, in the days before the internet, artwork was mailed by the U.S. mail, and later, in modern times, by Federal Express. But however it got there, you would open the envelope, and I mean, as a writer or as an editor, this stuff all exists conceptually. You kind of picture the movie in your mind, and you kind of take, writing a script, you're almost taking down notes and reporting on your own imagination, but you don't really know what its existence in the real world is going to be till you open that envelope or download that file and see the artwork, and you go, wow. Usually you go, wow, that's so much better than I imagined it. Once in a while you go, ugh, that's so much worse than usually, if you're working with somebody who's good, and I've been very lucky, to work with a lot of terrific people, you open that envelope and look at the art, and so that's kind of, in a way, the most rewarding, where this thing that was just this vague kind of notion in your mind, that somebody on the other end understands it and made it into really cool pictures to tell the story.
I want to hang on that for a second, Jen. Okay. I want to circle back on the Jack and Stan. When I was incredibly lucky when I was about 11, I got to meet Jack Kirby at a convention and just had a great experience with him. And it kind of got me to want to be in the comic industry as a writer and stuff like that. Years later, I got an opportunity to sit down with Stan and just talk to him for a few minutes. And I didn't want to just gush over Stan. So I told him about the story of when I met Jack when I was 11. And I kind of watched Stan's face as I was telling the story, and it really felt like he had some pure affection for Jack and this, by listening to the story. And then from reading your book, I kind of got that same feeling, both with Jack and with Steve Ditko, that maybe Stan separated business and the personal from his working relationships with them to their personal relationships. Do you think that's how it was, that Stan still loved these guys or cared about these guys outside of the business?
Well, I think Stan didn't realize, in some ways, the effect he had on people. Maybe he realized the effect he had on fans, but I don't think he might not have realized the effect he had on his peers, I think because he identified as kind of an employee and as a staffer and as a freelancer himself, one thing you find when you go back, you look at Stan's paychecks for, up until maybe the 80s, wasn't making, he did very well by comic book standards, and he made a nice middle-class living, but he wasn't making, there's a reason he took all those speaking engagements at colleges. I mean, he liked to do the research and speak to fans, and he liked to find out what the young people were thinking. But he liked getting paid. And I think to sustain the lifestyle he wanted, which was kind of an upper middle class suburban lifestyle, his salary and even his writing, if Stan was getting the top rate for writing comics, he still was getting next to nothing, right? I mean, I don't think people realize what a nickel and dime business it was, even until like the 80s. And so the question, so I think Stan saw himself more as like one of the guys, right? I mean, it's again complicated because he certainly could take charge as a boss.
Mm-hmm.
I think he liked them. I don't think he hung out with Ditko or Kirby. I think it's very interesting. The people that Stan has some very close friends and people who loved him. But these were people who worked for him for about 10 years and then got the hell out, so that they could say, I'm thinking about Jerry Robinson and Ken Bald and a few other people like that who were very close and very fond of Stan, but somewhere in them, they realized, he's a good guy to hang out with. He's a good friend. He's fun to go to dinner with. But I got to move on to advertising or to syndicated strips. So I think Stan loved Kirby and Ditko, and I think he was in awe of their talent. But I think maybe he did not. Or you hear stories from people. Like Mark even here will talk about how but other people too. I think Tom DeFalco. Stan will say to them, you know why Kirby left? And they'll go, well, Stan, I was in junior high school when that happened, so I don't really know what happened, but you were there, maybe. And I don't think it was some disingenuous thing. I think Stan just could not. Somehow he couldn't process it because you hear that too much, where he'll say to somebody in all sincerity, "I still don't know why Kirby left," where everybody else knew why Kirby left. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned this a second ago, that Stan has this kind of amazing ability to make readers feel like they were part of something special, that they were kind of on the inside of something exclusive.
Right.
Do you think, you mentioned that maybe he knew that. Do you think he did, that he understood what it was he was doing in the 60s and the 70s where, because it pulled me in when I started reading books, 5, 6, 7 years old. I'm like, oh man, I'm part of this. I am on the inside. And I think that's a lot of what made Marvel work, was not only the stories and the art and stuff, but also that sense of community that you were pulled into. Yeah. Do you think Stan really did that by accident, or was this just something that he pushed into his persona?
That's really that's a great question, because it's really the key to Stan and to Marvel, that Marvel made you feel like what they were doing was special and done just for you, right? The best popular culture does that, but sort of, right, if I'm watching, say, the What If show on Disney, I'm a little older now, I'm not 8 years old anymore, but I'm kind of aware that I'm watching a product of a corporate entertainment machine, and this particular brick in the wall may or may not be more or less effective, but I'm really, again, that's hence why I do it for a living, but I think Stan discovered it. I think it had a lot of different sources. I think some of it might have just been he was in his late 30s, early 40s. The business, certainly the company, and really almost the entire business had disappeared under his feet a couple of years before. I think there were also guys like Roy Thomas and Jerry Bales. These were adults who had read comics in the 1940s, and college kids, young people in their teens and 20s going to Ivy League colleges, and they were writing to him and asking him sophisticated questions. So I think partly it was Stan playing to that audience and to intelligent children, but I think part of it was just this, like, I've been doing, I'm 40 years old. I've been doing this since I'm 19 or 20. Let's see what happens if I treat the company as a club, if I kind of invent this fictional Marvel bullpen, based on the artist rooms of the 1940s, where there really was a Marvel. But I don't know the answer to that, because you can even see with the stories, you can see how and why he and Kirby and Ditko together kind of made this decision to bring things to another to multi levels, where a little kid could read it and get the action adventure, but there be some sophisticated and witty material and emotional material for older readers. That almost has a logic to it. The letters, because this is really directly into Stan's subconscious or id or whatever, right? I mean, in a pre-computer era, here's Stan Lee at whatever 7 o'clock at night. Everybody else is going home. He's there typing. In the days before the formal bullpen bulletins, he's typing a new letters page series of notes and promo blurbs for every single letters page, and trying to make it as funny as possible, and having to get it on the first draft because there's no redos, especially once you give it to the typesetting people, in those ancient. So that to me is in a way almost more or as miraculous as the characters themselves, that he stumbled on that. Obviously at a certain point he realized what he was doing. He was getting response, and then it became more conscious. But boy, that somewhere in there was just this desperation, or this, what have I got to lose? It might have. You mind if I blab on for a second? I'm sort of coming up with. It might even have had to do with some competition. Don't forget, Marvel was part of Martin Goodman's company called Magazine Management.
Right.
And the people writing those magazines, it was very weird. Goodman prided himself on hiring like Ivy League graduates, like Princeton and Yale graduates, to write his crappy, men's adventure magazines. He would go, see that person writing that schlock over there? They've got a master's degree in English from Yale, right? But these are people like Bruce J. Friedman, like Mario Puzo, famously started out. So Stan might have been inspired to try to compete with those people also.
Yeah. All right. Now, you worked you started in the 70s with Marvel.
I did.
So as Larry Lieber's assistant, you worked with Stan a lot. You toured with Stan doing the Wizard shows as the narrator for the stuff. So you've had a lot of time with Stan. When you started doing the research, did you come across anything that surprised you, that you didn't know, or was just outside of what you expected?
Yeah. Again, I'm going to just, respond a little, because I knew Stan. I was friendly with Stan. At a certain point, he even knew who I was, say I spent time with him at Wizard, and maybe I'd spend 10 minutes before the panel with him. And then I worked with him a lot. Oddly enough, I worked with him more after I left Marvel, when I worked for Byron Price, and I worked for a company called Visionary Media. So I was friendly with him. I think he regarded me positively, but I was never in his inner circle, which I think is better for writing biography, because then I feel it gave me some more objectivity. Because I sometimes, there are some reviews or some people imply that my biography is a hagiography, that it's unquestioned. But I think it's obviously a generally positive view. But there's, I just try not to put my thumb on the scale. There's a lot of stuff in my book that's not so flattering to Stan. I tried to really write what I could know, and knowing the comic business. I think it surprised me just how involved Martin Goodman was. Um, sort of the general view of history is that Martin Goodman had this big company and he sort of delegated the comics to Stan because he didn't care about them. But it's become clear to me that not only was Goodman more involved than you would think, but Goodman was more involved with Stan personally. That a lot of Stan's social life involved the Goodman family, and so although he was Goodman. It was very complicated. I think Stan was doubly related to Goodman, but both ways and very distant. Essentially, Martin's wife was Stan's mother's cousin. So so they were related, but certainly, because people sometimes say, "Oh, Goodman was Stan's uncle." It was nowhere near that straightforward. It was much more. But having said that, I think there were. So I think the influence of Martin Goodman on Stan personally and hence on Marvel globally was more than I had realized.
Do you have from either your personal, you explained that you didn't have a lot of personal experience with him, but do you have a favorite Stan story from either your research or from personal?
Yeah, well, I have. I'm trying to think of a story that I haven't told like 100 times. But I'll tell the story because it's a great story. This is one of, during the Wizard barnstorming years. Stan, this is one of those times. Stan was a day late. I think it was a Sacramento show, but I could be wrong. But he was late for the show, and what his people had said, and I have no reason to think this wasn't true, was that he'd had a bad reaction to a flu shot, and so he missed the Saturday. When usually at conventions, Stan will usually do like a private event. You pay a lot of money and you get to be like one of 10 people hanging out with Stan, or he'll do a big mass event that comes with your admission to the convention. So this was at the Wizard show, maybe 2014, 2015, somewhere at the Sacramento. And sure enough, the convention, they sent a plane for Stan to bring him up from LA because he just was, he wasn't feeling well, but he liked to honor his commitments, and I'm sure he wanted to get paid as well, so he looks like he's going to collapse backstage. I mean, he's holding on to the banister leading like the 3 steps up, and the president of Wizard gets up and he says, before Stan comes on, I want you to know that he's only going to do 20 minutes instead of the usual 45 because he had the reaction to the flu shot. He's not feeling well, but he didn't want to let you guys down, so please understand. So and now here's Stan Lee and Danny Fingeroth, and we come up and applause, and and I'm asking him. I mean, Stan really he needed a moderator really to so he could to repeat the questions to him. He was kind of a self-starter. He did not really, he was not somebody you had to draw out, but he was hard of hearing. So I'd repeat the questions, and every 5 minutes, somebody from the convention, is 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, wrap it up. It's 20 minutes. I say, Stan, it's been 20 minutes, and John explained to everybody that you're not feeling that well, and it was great that you came here to not let the fans down. But before we go, do you want any last words, so to speak, that you want to say? And he says to me, "Is God talking to you? Did he say we have to stop? I feel great. Let's keep going." Well, everybody's going nuts. I'm getting signals from Stan's people, from the convention people. I don't know what any of these signals mean, But so we went for about another 10 minutes. Then finally, they got the hook and dragged him off. But that was a pretty funny story that luckily You know, I could tell you another one that's very, you know, got a minute?
Oh, yeah. All the time you want.
Oh, this is another one that's, you know, Stan was a decent doodler. He wasn't an art, you know, he wasn't a straight on artist, but he did very funny caricatures. And they had arranged for him to draw a character of Spider-Man. Maybe they even had a camera over his shoulder, but you know, then they were going to raffle it off to somebody who answered a trivia question. So he does, and they did, and somebody, you know, answered the question, whatever it was, you know, who was the second artist on Spider-Man, John Romita, whatever the question was. Mm-hmm. And a minute later, there's a woman. A minute later, a blonde woman comes up and says, "I'm the winner. Can I have my drawing?" And I thought, you know, this doesn't look exactly like that woman, but you know, my vision isn't always great. Well, who would be so venal as to pretend to be the person who won a Stan Lee doodle of Spider-Man? Well, of course, it was somebody. It was a fraud. And a minute later, the real winner came up, and I looked and I went, "Oh, of course, that's the person who answered the." So by that point, Stan had left. But I said, I ran out and I found him and his people, and they said, well, get her address and we'll mail, and Stan will do another drawing and mail it to her. And he did, you know, I mean, so it's sort of a, you know, it simultaneously, it kind of makes you lose faith in human nature and then regain your hope in human nature, you know.
I want to shift away from the book now, but before I do, having just wrapped it up tonight, you know, like I said, I had 10 hours into it, and I finished it before when they said, "Hey, we got Danny Fingeroth. Who wants to?" I'm like, me.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I finished it this afternoon and got a few tears at the end. You know, I got to tell you, but I have to tell you that it's probably one of the most balanced and even telling of the history that I've come across. You know, it doesn't seem to be slanted one way or the other. It's a very fair take on the history, at least as much as I've known of it. So,
well, thank you. I really appreciate that, because I really worked hard to do that, you know, and yeah, I mean, it means a lot, you know. Because that was something, you know, because I don't think I realized going into it, you know, maybe that makes me an idiot. I don't think I realized going into it quite, you know, how checkered, you know, his interactions with people were, and you know, so but I really, so that means a lot. So thank you, and you know, I think people may, you know, obviously I want to have a title that's sold, so the title is a little, you know, a little kind of bland. You know, I wanted to get the word Marvel into the title. Yeah. So I think people may read the title and think, oh, it is just a puff piece or hagiography. But thank you. Yeah, I really worked hard to make it balanced and to give all sides, you know, of the story.
Yeah, it is an absolutely great, well, listen or read, depending on which way you do it.
Especially if you like New York accent, right?
Now, let me get to Jenna's question from earlier. Do you remember your first comic book shop, and do you know if it's still around?
Here's how old I am, Jenna. There were no comic shops when I started reading comics. There was no such thing. We got on our dinosaurs. We left the cave. We took some fire with us to keep predators. No, I'm from the era when there were two main sources that I would buy comics. One was a nameless newsstand run by a guy named Teddy on the corner of 86th Street and Lexington Avenue in New York City, in Manhattan. And then there was a newsstand, a candy store / newsstand called Farrell's on Lexington and 88th and 89th Street, around the corner from the highfalutin Dalton School. And then I ended up buying a lot of comics then, and then the occasional comic in a candy store candy / stationery store in the Bronx, and I visit my grandparents. The first comic book store that I remember was Super Snipe. That was on 2nd Avenue and 84th Street, run by a guy named Ed Summer, who passed away a few years ago. So that store no longer exists. But but I would say the bulk of my comic book buying as a kid was in newsstands and candy stores. Those two particular venues.
Well, for me, it was 5 and Dimes and the local 7-Eleven before I ever saw a comic shop. Yeah, so I understand where you're coming from. Yeah. Now, you did a handful of what if stories back in the day.
I did.
And a couple of them are kind of important in the sense you did What If the Alien Costume Had Possessed Spider-Man,
right,
which is really similar to a series that just came out of, I think it was called Spider's Shadow. And then What If Spider-Man Had Not Married Mary Jane Watson, which, then we get One More Day, which everybody's talking about right now because of the new Spider-Man movie.
right.
How did the ideas for What If come about? And at the time, was the book kind of looked at as a potential testing ground for ideas for the mainstream, or was it just kind of happenstance? You thought of the craziest ideas you could.
Well, I was writing it, I guess, in the volume. I wrote one issue in the first file. I wrote I guess it was half of a double-sized issue. Was What If Dazzler had become the Herald of Galactus? Because I was the writer of Dazzler at the time.
I remember that.
Yeah, but those the ones you mentioned, that's almost when comics, when you almost had to approach comics like graduate school or like a senior thesis, because it's like, okay, here's right. The challenge was, right, you have the mainstream stories, so a lot of smart people sat around, thinking up those stories to make them as airtight as possible, right? I mean, I've been on all sides of those seats. So when you're plotting a story, you do, well, what if this, what if that? I mean, that's sort of the premise of fiction in general. What if, so you're kind of trying to undo this, hopefully airtight construct that smart creative people came up with. No, I never thought that the what ifs would become the mainstream reality, only because all too often, they often ended up with the end of the world, or the planet blowing up, or civilization reverting, to the new beginning. I mean, that happened. I think I wrote What If the X-Men had lost Inferno, which ended up with like the world pretty much literally and figuratively going to hell. And then one of the ones that I hear most often that people, I get most to sign at conventions, and one that people bring up is, what if Daredevil killed the Kingpin? No, I think that you had to wait 25 or 30 years to suddenly have somebody go, hey, what if Jane Foster did become Thor? What if it's not such a kooky idea? Or something like that. No, I can't say that the precedent for that, I guess, the thing that came closest was Tom DeFalco and Ron Frenz's what if Peter and Mary Jane's baby had lived, and that became the basis for Spider-Girl, which also became the basis for that whole
the MC2 line,
the MC2 line. So maybe that helped. People realize that, these could sustain ongoing parallel universes. But yeah, I don't think that at that point. So the whole point of What If was to take those guardrails off. There were the only real rule, which they kind of don't honor in the TV show, which is fine. Is that there had to be one identifiable point of difference. And it's sort of, it could, which again is tricky because, if the theory is that we, the creators of the comics, know these characters, as well or better than anybody, then any decision that we, the writers and editors and artists, have them make in a story should really be the only decision that they can make given who they are, right? So what if is already a little bit of a cheat. It's, again, fine. No, but yeah, the idea that it would last, was very radical when we did that two-parter. Was what if Spider-Man had not married Mary Jane, and then what if part 2? What if Spider-Man had married the Black Cat?
Right. Okay. Sean asks, are there any current writers that you are really enjoying their work?
Yes. The current is funny. It's like, my answer is always Brian Bendis, but of course he's been at it for, he's been at it, in the mainstream for 20 years and for years before that. So, but I'll stick with that, because Brian, I really feel, has taken the traditional, Marvel and DC universes and characters and found that sweet spot of new stuff that you I mean, that's the brilliance of these characters. Every time you think that, everything's been done with them, suddenly somebody like Brian comes along. I'm in the process now of catching up on a lot of stuff. I've sort of been in more of the kind of history mode. I love, I love Dean Haspiel's work. I love what Dean does as a writer and artist on the Red Hook and his other creator-owned material. I love what Dan Schicade does with his characters on Webtoon. There's a lot and I'm sure the minute we end this, I'll go, oh crap, but I literally, not that I'm, I literally just ordered Dragon Hoops, by Gene Yang. Partly because I need to read it because I love Gene's stuff, but also I'm going to be doing a panel for the San Diego Con on. San Diego Con is not San Diego. New York Con is as far it's going to be live. Depending on many things, but so far it's still live. But they're having an online panel track. So I'm doing a panel called Will Eisner, The Next Generation, with Dan Schicade, Gene Yang, and Jerry Kraft. People know Jerry from New Kid and his Newbery Award. And it's going to be some younger creators talking about Will Eisner's ongoing influence. But yeah, so like I said, I there's a lot I need to catch up on, but Brian has just been somebody who I've been impressed with, from his self-published work and of course Powers, and he's like I said, to call him new is sort of, you have to be my age to think of Brian Bendis as new.
That's okay. For me, the 80s was just 10 years ago constantly. So I like I said, I get it.
10 years ago? Oh my God.
Well, we've got about 8 minutes left. And there's one character I want to throw out and talk to you about, because Marvel had this thing where they kept trying to recreate Spider-Man. In the 70s, they did Nova. In the 80s, I think it was Speedball. And then early 90s, they did Darkhawk. And now they're doing a whole new version of Darkhawk. So Tom DeFalco and Mike Manley came up with the character, handed it to you, and then you went and wrote 50 issues of a book of the character.
And then on the second day.
What was it about Darkhawk that, I got that vibe at the time when the book came out, and I bought the first issue. I think I have all 50. That it was kind of like jumping on with the new Spider-Man. But there was something different about the character. How did you approach the character? With what did Tom give you, and what did you run with? What was it that you wanted to do with the character?
Tom gave us a like a 4 or 5 page, very rough outline of the character, and I mean, everything was there: the backstory, the motive. I'd say a thing that I changed, and I don't want to say. I mean, Tom, if you remember the origin, the Chris Powell sees his father in this old a fun house, this old haunted house, a fun house in a carnival on the outskirts of Queens, where and he sees his father taking a payoff from a mobster, and his father was a cop who taught him his whole life to respect the law and to always do the right thing, and his mother was an assistant district attorney, and Tom had the father get killed, and so the kid does the traditional, I found this magic amulet that gives me superpowers, and now I will vow, like Spider-Man, like Uncle Ben died because of me, and I will fight injustice. And so it was a similar thing. And the twist, which was fine, and I'm sure it would have sold just as well, but I wanted to put my own imprint on it, and Tom left enough leeway like that because he's a generous fellow. And I said, well, what if instead of the father dying, which we have seen, and it's certainly a rock solid traditional origin, what if Chris sees his father seem to betray the ideals that he taught him to live by? What does that do to your mind then? And and your friggin', superpower endowing magic amulet, So, and I think Tom, as I recall, liked that, and we ran with it. So that was, but yeah, it was definitely the idea was Spider-Man for the 90s. When the 90s, were not that far from the 80s and were not that long ago. And I wanted to, I even did a mini series with Spider-Man, Speedball, Nova, and Dark Horse called Spider-Man Friends and Enemies. That the conceit was all the Spider-Man for the whatevers, bring them together. So, as what I always tried to do when writing or editing comics, although I knew full well that the audience, there were a lot of adults and college students and people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, I still sort of wanted to try to write something that would appeal to them, but that would really be for a kid, for a 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old kid who would have that Spider-Man for their era, So that was the aim with Dark Hawk,
Okay. Now we got just a couple minutes left, so I got to ask. You got your 10-year long or however long it took you to write the A Marvelous Life, but what's next? What?
Well, I mean, I was, yes, I was thinking about the book. It took me about 3 years, about 2, actually writing, actually going, oh, thank you for the advance. I guess I should write the book. That's probably about 2 years. So it of concentrated work. I've got a couple of projects where I'm attempting to pivot into things that are not necessarily comics, but that are still popular culture. So I have a Bob Dylan project, not a biography, but a Dylan-based project. Been a little complicated by the controversy over Dylan that erupted last, I think, 2 weeks ago. If you don't know about it, I'm not going to, but
people can look it up. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, even before, Dylan was always controversial, not unlike, I find it not a big jump to go from the melodrama of Stan Lee's comic book to the melodrama of Bob Dylan's music. So I get why I'm obsessed with both. So the Dylan related book, and then because, writing about Stan Lee and Jack Kirby wasn't, controversy inducing enough, I've been working on for about in various forms for a long time, a biography of Jack Ruby, the guy who killed Lee Harvey Oswald. And, there's absolutely no controversy about anything relating to the Kennedy assassination. So
Yeah, nothing at all. No.
So those are two projects that my agent is shopping around. I got a few other irons in the fire. So those are my big deal things right now.
Oh, very cool. And I like to see that you're taking on very light fare, things that...
That's it. I figure kind of want to just keep things... I was about to say keep things light, like writing about Mickey Mouse, but of course there's no character more complicated.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I like to keep myself challenged.
Okay. Where can people find you on social media? That seems to be the big thing now everybody wants to know.
Yes. Well, Danny at DannyFingeroth.com. That's pretty clever, eh? And my main social medium is Facebook, like all the other people who are above 17 years old. So Facebook, somewhat on Twitter, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, but probably Facebook is the one that you'll find me at most. And and that's where I'll plug whatever I'm doing and whatever projects I have coming out and stuff from my friends. So that is where to find me.
All right, terrific. Thank you very much, Danny. This has been a real pleasure. And everybody listening, go pick up A Marvelous Life, the amazing story of Stan Lee. It is a terrific book, both in print or audio. You can hear Danny read all 14 hours of it for you.
Imagine if this was great, and it was, of course. Imagine 14 hours of me talking in your ear. Who would not want that? It's actually, I think it's pretty good. But thank you. Thank you so much, Dan. These are great questions. A lot of fun.
Oh, thank you. All right, everybody, stick around. We've got, I believe, Eric Palicki is coming up next. I think that's what's happening. But either way, stick around for more here on The Experience.
And Kyle, feel better. Get well soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks a lot.